Town Bank Mortgage, NMLS number 512138, is an equal housing lender. This podcast is for informational purposes only. And now, the man born with a 5 o'clock shadow and with the NMLS number 2028201. He is a gentleman. He is a scholar. He is
Tyler Crawley.
Well, it looks like Trump's loss is your game. Yeah, the tariff thing, which is not decided, not even close. But that uncertainty may be a benefit. Well, it is to wannabe homeowners out there. We'll discuss. But welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition of Wilmington Mortgage. I am the aforementioned host of this podcast, Tyler Crawley, of course, loan officer at Town Bank Mortgage right here in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we break down the top stories of the day that are impacting mortgage rates, and nothing bigger than the tariff ruling that we got from the Supreme Court on Friday that I was actually surprised. I will say I was surprised at the lack of movement in the market. I thought for sure, I didn't know which way we were going to see the market move. I think there's a lot of uncertainty and just everyone kind of guessing what was going to happen, because the response from President Trump, I think most people were kind of expecting, where he just said, all right, well, if I can't use this power, I'm going to use this other power, and then implemented these new tariffs. And so I think that was why you kind of saw a little bit of everyone just kind of deciding where we were going to go. And then today was the bigger move. You know, we also have some concern about AI. There was this article floating around. I can't remember where it was from, like Citron or something like that. It sounds like citrus or something along those lines. And some people were arguing that it's sort of pessimistic look on AI might have played a role in the drop, but I think it's all tariff related. So let's start from the beginning. Let's go back to Friday. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that the tariffs that had been imposed by the president and his administration were in fact unconstitutional. Not tariffs in general. There was sort of some miscommunication on that. People said, we've used tariffs, for all the way until, 1913, when we had the income tax all of a sudden, was added to the Constitution. And so that's how we started collecting taxes. And then we pushed, I'm sorry, I think it was 1910. The Federal Reserve Act, I think, was 1913. I think I'm getting my dates all confused here. It was all because there's a great book by Roger Lowenstein called America's Bank about the creation of the Federal Reserve. And it happened pretty soon after the income tax. And then that was leading to kind of the reduction of tariffs, and that our biggest sort of revenue source. Then we went to sort of the income tax. But no one's saying that tariffs are unconstitutional. They're saying implemented this way, they were unconstitutional. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, said the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, also known as IEEPA, does not give presidents the authority to impose tariffs. Trump had argued the large trade deficits, record levels, were, quote, an unusual and extraordinary threat to national security, giving him the authority under that law. Roberts and 5 other justices rejected that argument, writing the law's reference to regulate and importation could not justify sweeping tariffs. Roberts wrote, these words cannot bear such weight. He added that IEEPA, quote, contains no reference to tariffs or duties. Roberts noted no previous president had ever used the law in that way. So that was one of the aspects of it. And then there was another argument that was made by Roberts. So it was 3 Democrats on the court. So you had Sotomayor, you had Kagan, and Jackson. And then you had Roberts, Barrett, and Gorsuch. That was the 6th majority. Now, the Democrats didn't sign on to this one. So this was just the Republican appointees, Roberts, Barrett, and Gorsuch. They said that it also invoked the major questions doctrine, which requires clear congressional authorization for policies with vast economic consequences. So they're saying is the fact that the Congress never explicitly says, hey, we're giving our tariff power to the president, then there's no way to argue that that's what they want. They have to be clear about that. So if Congress is going to pass a law and they're going to pass off their responsibility to the president, which they can do, they need to say it. They can't be vague. That's the argument from the Supreme Court. Roberts emphasized that while many laws allow the executive branch to, quote, regulate, that does not automatically include the power to tax imports. And I do like that they noted that it was, Roberts did that famously in the Obamacare ruling, where he said that Obamacare was a tax. Remember, there was an argument that it wasn't a tax, and he said, no, it's a tax. It's constitutional, but it's a tax. And Roberts is kind of doing the same thing here, saying in this case it's not constitutional, but it's a tax. So he likes to do that. One of the other reasons, it's funny, the reason why the three Democrats, I think, weren't on this ruling is because the last time this ruling was used, or the major questions argument was used, was when the court was kicking Biden's student loan payment, where he was trying to say, hey, I'm going to forgive all these student loans. And they said, well, you don't have the power to do that. And that was, once again, the major questions argument. The Congress has not clearly given the president the power to do that. And so I'm not sure, but I'm assuming the Democrats appointees may have been on that side, so they couldn't now join this side of the argument. So they didn't sign on to that particular opinion, but they were on board with the 6-3 majority that argued that the president did not have that power. On the other side, the dissent warned the court was overstepping its bounds. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, joined by Justice Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, argued that tariffs are a traditional tool used to regulate imports. Kavanaugh wrote in his 61-page dissent that policy debates over tariffs are not for the federal judiciary to resolve. And so that was the big announcement that happened on Friday. And then, like I said, I don't think anyone was too surprised that President Trump sort of came out and was like, all right, well, if I can't do tariffs this way, then we're going to do tariffs this way. So I'm going to do another way. And then he immediately implemented like a 10% across the board tariff on everything against every country. And then on Saturday, he just raised it to 15%. And so I think that's what I think maybe if he just stuck at 10, I think it would maybe you wouldn't have seen the reaction from the market today that we did. But I think the fact that he just sort of was like, all right, we're going to do 15 now. Because one of the things that's really been, I think, an issue with the tariffs is that they sort of be like, they're, for the most part, at Trump's discretion. I mean, every day. I mean, one day it's up, down, higher, lower, not going to change, but then we are going to. And so it's the uncertainty. It's not so much the tariffs are a problem for the economy. It's the uncertainty, which markets hate, that I think is creating a lot of this problem. And so I think the president just sort of willy-nilly announcing, nah, actually, we're going to do 15% across the board was a reaction the markets didn't want to see. And then earlier today, we got a report that European Union officials who were scheduled to vote on the latest trade deal, the EU and the United States, they're now pausing any work on that deal, and there is now not going to be a vote. The EU's International Trade Committee has been scheduled to vote Tuesday to advance this new agreement, but Bernard Lang, chair of the European Parliament's Trade Committee, said on Twitter that, quote, EP works on the EU-US deal is on hold until further notice, adding that clarity and legal certainty are needed before any further steps can be taken. This seems to be, like I said, the uncertainty, the sort of murkiness is why they've decided to pull out. And so because of that, see, tariffs work in kind of an interesting way, is that, as many have noted, the long-term implications, the long-term impact, I should say, of tariffs is actually deflationary. It actually causes prices to fall, not rise, which seems kind of weird, right? Because they are a tax, and so you're adding a cost onto something. So shouldn't that raise prices? And so the way it works is that it's short-term inflationary, long-term disinflationary. And so what happens is that prices rise, and then, now assuming there isn't an increase in the money supply, if that's the case, then, they will be inflationary. But once again, that's the increase of the money supply, not so much the tariff itself. If more spending, the government gives people more money to be able to pay those tariffs, then you don't see any reduction in consumption, because now all of a sudden you have the money to be able to pay those higher prices. Where normally, if you don't have an increase in money supply, What happens is if prices rise, everyone has the same amount of money, you then have to choose to consume less because things cost more. And so then what happens is that you consume less, economic growth slows, stalls, maybe even goes negative. And then that causes companies to say, okay, well, in order to keep our market share or increase our market share, or at least reduce how much we're losing, we're going to lower prices to get those consumers back. And that's the disinflation that can happen. So long term, they will actually lower prices. Short term, they increase prices. So the question is that when people, bond markets, the Fed, are evaluating tariffs, they have to look at it and say, okay, what's going to happen to this? Like, is the economic slowdown going to eventually lead to lower prices, or are we going to see a possible increase in the money supply, more money out there? And so we're not going to see an economic slowdown, and we are going to see prices rise, and then that would mean we need to raise rates to deal with that. Or is the increase in prices going to cause an economic slowdown, and then we may have to drop rates to get consumption back? So that's the debate. What is going to be the bigger hit? The short-term rising prices for inflation or caused by tariffs, or the economic slowdown that potentially caused by tariffs? And so I think the fact that you're seeing the EU say, okay, we're going to stop any possible progress with this trade deal till we get a little bit more clarity, that's going to cause a slowdown because it's going to hurt trade. That means that, when you're not trading, you're not going to have access to certain types of goods, and it's just going to cause a slowdown. And if all the countries start doing this, deals that they've already been agreed to, we've already heard about potentially opening up once again the USMCA, which was also once known as NAFTA. Are we going to see renegotiation of that? And then could that then lead to also supply chains kind of breaking down? And then that would cause an economic slowdown, which then could lead to lower rates. And so that's the thing that we don't really know right now. The markets seem to be interpreting it, which, by the way, we did have the 10-year was down 5 basis points to 4.0, just under 4.03%. Which is the lowest level we've seen since, what was that? Almost the end. Yeah, the ending of November was the last time we saw rates this low. So it's been a little while. The Mortgage News Daily 30-year index had rates under 6%. Lowest level since 2022. It was just under, like 5.99%. Let me see if that's where it actually ended up. I forgot to check to see. Yeah, 5.99%, lowest level since 2022. So as of now, this tariff confusion, along with, like I said, there's been a little talk about what's going on with AI. As there's always been, little concern about is the AI hype, because there's this really big discussion that's confusing a lot of people. Is we're seeing pretty solid economic growth. I know the fourth quarter report wasn't that great, but a lot of that was blamed on the economic, the government shutdown. And so a lot of people were saying, it's kind of weird. We're seeing all this growth, but there's no job creation. And usually they go hand in hand. When the economy's growing, there's jobs being created. And people are saying, oh, maybe that's the AI productivity gain. And that starts to worry people. That, we could see massive economic growth without the jobs and salaries that would benefit people out there in the real world. And so there's a little bit of that, but I think a lot of it today was the tariff concern. So, like I said, Trump's loss at the Supreme Court could be your gain if you're looking to buy a house right now. So take advantage. I don't know how long this is. You never know. You never know how long it's going to last. All right. So this is the tariff show. That's what it was all about here today. We did get a manufacturing report that showed a little bit of a slowdown. Nothing too crazy, but nowhere near the big tariff decision by the Supreme Court and sort of what impact that's going to have going forward. But that's it. We're done. You guys enjoy your Monday. We'll be back here Tuesday for another edition of Wilmington Mortgage. And remember, as always, do not wait to buy real estate. You buy real estate and wait.